I've been making rhubarb wine for well over 10 years. And I think that of all the country wines, and by country wine, I mean wines that you can make from scratch using berries and fruit and vegetables, I think that rhubarb wine is potentially the best. And a lot of home brewers would agree with me. Now the end product you can see is clear, so very professional looking, and it is sweet, this version, but it has that characteristic tang from rhubarb that we love so much. And yes, you can taste rhubarb in it. It is absolutely delicious. Now, because my recipe is so good, and I promise that if you like rhubarb and you like wine, you'll enjoy this wine as well, I'm gonna show you how to make it. And all you need is a few ingredients, including fresh rhubarb and some winemaking equipment. I'm Tanya Anderson from Lovely Greens, and I'm an organic gardener, I'm a soap maker, I'm a beekeeper, and I love cooking homegrown meals straight from the garden. And if you'd like to follow along for some more gardening tips and creative ways to use plants in your own home, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below and click the little bell icon as well. And that way you'll get notifications when new videos are out. Okay, rhubarb wine. We're going to be making 6 bottles of homemade rhubarb wine from scratch. This is a white wine, obviously made with rhubarb, a few other ingredients, and depending on what you do at the end of the fermentation stage, it can be either quite sweet and lemony or dry and zingy. I've listed all of the ingredients and the equipment that you'll need to make rhubarb wine down in the video description, and that's that text that accompanies the video. And I also have a printable recipe for rhubarb wine. And if you want to print out the recipe so you can save it from year to year and also see the text instructions, you'll need to go to my website, lovelygreens.com. I've put a link down in the video description, but there'll also be a link that pops up on the screen right now. Now, making rhubarb wine is not difficult, but you do need to work with clean equipment, high quality ingredients, and also you need a bit of patience because it takes at least 6 months to make. Most of that time, it's sitting around in a cupboard. There's very little active time involved, so you do have to be patient. I would even say that waiting up to a year is going to be even better because the longer that you age this, I would say in the first year or two, the more mellow and delicious it will become. First off, the ingredients. You'll need about 5 pounds of rhubarb, and you can use regular rhubarb, which tends to be green to pink on the outside, but once you cut it open, it's green right the way through. It will give you a more full-bodied, slightly more acidic and more rhubarby wine. You can also use forced rhubarb, which is available in supermarkets in early spring. It's pink right the way through. You can also force rhubarb in your garden. It will create a slightly less acidic rhubarb wine. You'll also need 3 pounds of sugar, just ordinary white sugar, 1 1/4 cups of freshly brewed black tea, and by black tea I mean English breakfast or ordinary builder's tea. You'll need 3 quarts of water, and the water should be sterilized or distilled, 2 teaspoons of yeast nutrients, 1 sachet of white wine yeast. For after the fermentation stage, you'll need a Campden tablet, and then if you sweeten the wine, you'll also need a ½ teaspoon of potassium sorbate and a cup of sugar. The first step in making rhubarb wine is preparing the rhubarb and making kind of a rhubarb syrup. You begin by washing the rhubarb sticks, and if they have leaves, cut them off and send them to the compost pile. And then cut the sticks into ½ inch or thinner slices. Place them in a clean and sterilized tub and pour in the sugar. Stir it well, and then cover with a clean towel or plastic wrap and leave for 1 to 3 days. After that time, the sugar will have pulled the moisture out of the rhubarb, creating a rich syrup. Next, bring 4 quarts of water to a boil and then allow it to cool to lukewarm. While it's cooling, make a large mug of strong black tea and allow that to cool too. Pour the lukewarm water over the rhubarb and the sugar. Stir well to dissolve any of the sugar at the bottom of the tub. Pour the liquid through a strainer or a sieve into another clean tub. Discard the rhubarb pieces, or you can save them to make rhubarb pie or another dessert. Next, pour the black tea into the rhubarb liquid. With the rhubarb liquid prepared, we're ready for initial fermentation. So empty the contents of the yeast packet and the yeast nutrient into the rhubarb liquid. Stir it well and then cover the tub with a clean towel and allow it to sit undisturbed at room temperature or slightly warmer for 5 days. If you take a peek at it during this time, you'll notice lots of fizzing and bubbling, and that is the yeast coming alive and starting to metabolize the sugar. At the end of the 5 days, that bubbling will have calmed down quite a bit, and you can rack the liquid through a sterilized siphoning hose from the tub and into a clean demijohn. As the liquid flows into the demijohn, adjust the hose in the tub so that it's able to get all the clean liquid out. Just make sure that the tube doesn't suck up the murky residue at the bottom of the tub. The next stage is secondary fermentation. Up until this point, the yeast has been interacting with the sugar and converting it into alcohol, but there's still a lot of sugar left. So once your liquid is in the demijohn, fit a drilled bung into the demijohn's opening. Next, pour a little boiled but cooled water into the airlock's chamber before inserting it into the drilled hole in the bung. This airlock will allow gas to escape but keeps air and potential contaminants from getting inside. Leave the wine to ferment in a place that's at least room temperature, if not a bit warmer. A dark to dim place is also best, but I usually ferment wines in my bright kitchen and haven't had any issues. Light can potentially oxidize the wine though. The temperature that your wine should be at during its fermentation varies depending on the type of wine yeast that you're using, so look at the sachet for this information. It can take about 3 to 6 weeks for fermentation to complete. By this time, the airlock may only be releasing a bubble of gas every minute or so, or none at all. The next stage is aging the rhubarb wine. You'll want to rack the wine from the demijohn and into a clean tub using the siphoning hose. Like before, avoid sucking up the sludge at the bottom. It's basically the remains of yeast and will make your wine look and taste pretty bad. Then add a crushed Campden tablet to it. Crush the tablet and then mix it with a small amount of water and pour it in the wine. Campden tablets contain sodium or potassium metabisulfite, which stops the fermenting process. It also stops mold and bacteria from growing in your wine and spoiling it during the aging process. Adding it is not optional. Next, pour or siphon the wine into a clean and sterilized demijohn. You can use the same one that you've been using if you clean it, but a second one that you've prepared and is ready to go is even better. If the wine doesn't come up to the bottom of the demijohn's neck, you need to top it up now with simple sugar syrup. Too much oxygen touching the wine during aging can adversely affect the flavor of the wine. If you do add sugar syrup, you also need to add potassium sorbate at this point. And this stops any yeast from coming back from the dead and starting to ferment the sugar that you've just added. You mix the powder with a small amount of water and then pour it into the wine. Next, fit a closed bung in the demijohn's opening and then allow it to age for 6 months or longer. During this time, you should keep it in a dark place at a constant, cool temperature, and the demijohn should be stored upright. We're almost at the finish line. After 6 months or a little bit more of patiently waiting, the wine is clear, it's a lovely golden color like a really good white wine, and it's time to decant it into individual bottles. What you'll want to do now is take the demijohn from where you've been storing it, bring it into the kitchen and put it on the counter, and then siphon the wine into clean and sterilized wine bottles and then cork them. Although you can technically drink it immediately, it's better if you wait at least a month, maybe more, to let it age and mellow out. I've just cracked open this bottle and I've just topped myself up. I've been having a few sips thus far and it is so good. I have outdone myself this time. I've made rhubarb wine many times before, but I think this might be the best batch. And the flavor is very sweet and fruity, but it has that edge, that slight edge of rhubarb, not overpowering, but it's there. And it smells just crisp and clean, and it is just beautiful. Now, you don't tend to think of making wine from things that you're growing in the garden, let alone rhubarb. But honestly, you can make so many beautiful country wines from things like black currants and elderberry, from parsnips, from lots of different things. And this rhubarb wine has got to be right at the top of those country wines, and it's not all that difficult to make. I think through this video and through the instructions over on my website, you have a really good idea of what to expect. And if you have any questions, if you want to give this recipe a go, you can leave me a comment. I'll be more than happy to help answer those questions. But I think that if you enjoy wine and if you enjoy rhubarb, why not pair them together and make rhubarb wine? Thank you so much for following along with this recipe, and let me know if you do end up making rhubarb wine, and let me know what you think about it. Cheers.